As I readied myself for a quiet weekend alone, my husband was bustling about in preparation for what he declared was a business trip. His voice was sharp as he instructed me, "I'm going on a business trip, so don't you dare call me for anything trivial." Though his departure was nothing out of the ordinary, his demeanor was harsher this time. I tried to assure him that I'd only reach out in an emergency, but that only seemed to irritate him further. It was no surprise, really. His so-called business trip was actually a secret rendezvous with his mistress. His threats grew more absurd by the moment. "If you keep being a nuisance, I'll claim emotional distress and sue you," he exclaimed. His empathy had vanished, replaced by a selfish disregard for anyone but himself. He seemed oblivious to our daughter's illness and focused solely on his own desires, often neglecting the needs of our family. I remained silent, protecting myself and our children from his growing hostility. On the day he left, I stumbled upon shocking news. My husband had been involved in a severe car accident. Despite this, I remembered his stern warning and chose not to contact him, deciding that his fate was no longer my concern. With my phone turned off, I allowed myself a small smile. There was a secret he didn't know, one that might change everything. My name is Chloe. I'm a 27-year-old art teacher who crafts handmade accessories from home. Crafting has been my passion since childhood, and though I paused to raise our 3 children, I resumed my craft when my youngest started school, selling my creations online. My husband, Hudson, is 4 years my senior. We reconnected at a high school reunion and bonded over our mutual love for hands-on work. He worked in site engineer, a job he took very seriously, following in his father's footsteps. Hudson's parents, active and in their 70s, frequently visited us. Their presence often felt more intrusive than supportive. They never truly understood the nature of my work from home, dismissively commenting that it wasn't real work and lacked the importance of Hudson's career. Moreover, they showed little regard for our daughter, Ruby's serious shellfish allergy, treating it as mere fussiness and nearly endangering her life on one occasion by offering her shellfish. This challenging dynamic with his parents, coupled with Hudson's recent actions and my newfound information, left me contemplating the future and the well-being of my family as I turned off my phone to enjoy a brief respite from the turmoil. A troubling event unfolded due to a repeated misunderstanding about Ruby's severe shellfish allergy. Despite my numerous explanations, it was challenging to convey the seriousness of the issue to certain family members. They believed it was all in Ruby's mind and insisted that exposing her gradually would help her overcome it. They even suggested that no one really dies from allergies, which felt like talking to a brick wall. To ensure Ruby's safety, I never left her alone with Hudson's parents. However, they began to drop by unexpectedly when I was not at home, increasing my fears of a potential accident. Despite my pleas, Hudson wouldn't address the matter with his parents to prevent their unscheduled visits. Hudson often defended his parents, suggesting their experience with raising children should be enough to trust their judgment. Exhausted from work and overwhelmed, he left me to handle the household and the kids mostly alone. His understanding of Ruby's allergy was limited, and he often used me as an outlet for his stress. Our son, Mason, who had no allergies himself, became an invaluable support. He would read food labels and help protect Ruby. He was protective of his sister and increasingly resentful toward Hudson and his parents. One particularly trying day, after Hudson left early for work, he called asking me to clean his parents' house while his mom was out. Despite having my work to handle, Hudson dismissed it as trivial and insisted I help out. Reluctantly, I went to his parents' house. While there, I received a call from a coworker of Hudson's, informing me that Hudson's father had left some important documents at home. I collected the documents and delivered them to Hudson's office. At the office, the coworker, who I recognized from our wedding, apologized for not calling Hudson directly, not wanting to challenge his pride. He appreciated my help, but his next comment puzzled me. He mentioned Hudson had been taking time off to care for Ruby, which was news to me. On probing further, I discovered Hudson had been claiming time off work under the pretense of caring for Ruby, which was completely untrue. I was stunned and confused by his deceit. As I drove home, lost in thought, I realized the extent of the misunderstanding and misinformation within our family about Ruby's health and the lengths Hudson would go to avoid confronting the issue directly. This incident deepened my resolve to protect Ruby and made me reconsider how we communicated and handled responsibilities within our family. That evening, as darkness enveloped our home and the children drifted into sleep, I settled in front of the television to unwind. Later, Hudson returned home, his arrival marked by a habitual late hour. He was visibly annoyed as he confronted me. "You didn't clean my parents' house today." Mom called to complain, he said with a click of his tongue. I was taken aback. My day had been so chaotic with unexpected tasks at Hudson's office that I completely forgot about cleaning his parents' place. He continued, his frustration apparent. "You're always home and still, you didn't manage to clean? Did you go out instead?" I tried to explain that I had indeed visited the house, but had to rush something to his father's office, yet his expression shifted. A mix of confusion and an attempt to mask his true feelings. His sudden distance and every movement now sparked my suspicion. "Who asked you to go to the company?" he questioned, fear seeping through his facade of a day off. Opting to keep my realization to myself, I played along. "I'm not sure. I just delivered the documents and forgot about the cleaning," I said, hoping to ease the tension. "Just apologize to Mom tomorrow. I'm exhausted and going to bed," he concluded, his relief palpable, but his demeanor still guarded. His actions were a clear signal to me. Hudson was concealing something significant. After a restless night of contemplation, a grim suspicion took root. Was Hudson unfaithful? If he was exploiting our daughter Ruby's illness as a facade for his deceit, it was unforgivable. Ruby's severe allergies made her school life challenging, and despite our full support, Hudson trivialized her struggles, even claiming allergies were psychological, all the while using them as an excuse to be absent. Fueled by anger and unable to dispel my doubts, I decided to hire a private investigator. It was a difficult financial decision, given the earnings from my online business, but the uncertainty was unbearable. Weeks later, the investigator's report arrived, confirming my worst fears. Hudson was indeed having an affair. He often skipped work to spend time with his mistress, a young woman in her 20s with striking features and a confident aura. Though not entirely unexpected, the revelation left me speechless. The foundation of our marriage crumbled, and instead of sorrow, I felt only rage and revulsion. I continued to collect evidence with the investigator and consulted a lawyer to discuss divorce proceedings, focusing on alimony, child support, and custody arrangements. My thoughts now centered on a future with my children, far removed from the past I had shared with Hudson. A few days later, Hudson nonchalantly mentioned he'd be working over the weekend on a remote project, claiming it required his presence for a preliminary survey and that he'd return on Sunday. Knowing this to be another lie, as his job no longer required such travel, I was undeterred. My resolve was firm and my path forward clear. 5 months back, Hudson transitioned to a job that no longer required him to travel overnight, eliminating any work-related excuses to be away from home. Yet, I suspected he was planning a secret weekend getaway, possibly with someone else. Concerned about potential emergencies while he was away, I mentioned that Ruby was feeling unwell, Mason was still recovering from a cold, and we wouldn't have the usual support from my parents since they were on a trip. But Hudson, clearly irritated, insisted that I avoid contacting him over trivial matters during his busy work schedule, which only deepened my suspicions. His reaction seemed overly defensive, hinting he might be hiding something. After he retreated to our bedroom angrily, I decided to investigate further. Sneaking his credit card from its usual hiding spot, a place where I had previously found it, I logged into his account using the same old password he always used. There, I discovered a charge from what appeared to be a luxury inn located in a remote mountainous region, an unlikely destination for his parents who were supposed to be at a seaside hotel. Convinced he was planning to meet his mistress, I felt a mix of anger and betrayal. Determined to take control of the situation, I started browsing apartment rental sites and scheduled 5 viewings for the upcoming weekend. When the weekend finally came, Hudson left quietly with his overnight bag. I cleaned the house and prepared to go apartment hunting, telling Mason, who was lounging on the couch, to take care of Ruby. While viewing apartments, I planned to discuss the possibility of a divorce with the children later, expecting they wouldn't be too shocked given their weak bond with Hudson, who often overlooked Ruby's allergies. By Saturday evening, I had found the perfect apartment, but decided to finalize everything the following day. The next morning, after another visit to the real estate office to sign the lease and handle the paperwork, I felt a sense of relief. Despite the financial strain of paying for a private investigator, legal fees, and now a new apartment, I saw these expenses as necessary steps toward a new beginning. However, just as I was leaving the office, filled with thoughts of Hudson possibly enjoying his illicit trip, my phone rang. It was Mason, his voice panicked, informing me that Ruby had collapsed and they were on their way to the hospital in an ambulance. As the sound of sirens filled the air, my hands trembled while holding the phone. Mason passed it to a paramedic, who informed us that Ruby was suffering from anaphylactic shock. I was baffled. How had this happened? I had been meticulous about avoiding allergens in her food. Overwhelmed, I rushed to my car but found myself too shaken to even start the engine. In desperation, I dialed Hudson's number. This was a genuine emergency. He should have been available, but he didn't answer, no matter how many times I called. Frustrated yet somewhat composed by the effort, I stopped trying to reach him and drove straight to the hospital. Upon arrival, I saw Mason waiting outside the examination room. "Is Ruby okay, doctor?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Please calm down, Mrs. Brown. Ruby is stable now. Her blood pressure dropped, but she's resting peacefully," the doctor reassured me. A wave of relief washed over me, and tears filled my eyes as the gravity of the situation hit me. We had narrowly avoided a tragedy. The doctor praised Mason for his quick thinking in calling the ambulance. I swelled with pride for my son, who had acted so bravely to protect his sister. Back at home, I grabbed Ruby's insurance card and noticed Hudson still in the file. If he had planned to stay overnight at the inn, he should have taken it with him. With no time to dwell on this, I hurried back to the hospital. As Mason and I completed the admission forms, he nudged me and pointed to a news report on the hospital's lobby TV. It showed a single-car accident on a mountain road, the same road leading to the inn Hudson was supposed to be at. The footage was clear. The car, though heavily damaged at the front, had an intact rear with a license plate visible. We recognized it instantly. The report mentioned that Hudson and a female passenger were involved, but their injuries weren't life-threatening. Realizing Hudson had been unfaithful was a painful confirmation. Mason, old enough to grasp the situation, remained silent. I felt a deep sense of shame for letting the situation escalate to this point, burdening my children with adult worries. Just then, my phone rang. It was Hudson. I hesitated, remembering his past dismissiveness. "Don't call me for anything trivial." The irony stung as he now bombarded my phone, desperate for my attention. I chose to ignore his calls. Turning off one's phone in a hospital wasn't unheard of. After finishing the paperwork, Mason and I returned home, only to find Hudson's parents waiting outside. Exhausted from the day's events and not in the mood for more confrontations, I braced myself for yet another challenge. I left Mason in the car and made my way towards Chloe, who was visibly shaken. "Where have you been, Chloe?" "We've been desperately trying to contact you," I questioned, frustration edging my voice. She revealed that she had turned her phone off because Hudson had been in a serious car accident and was now undergoing surgery, expecting to be hospitalized for a couple of weeks. Surprisingly calm, I responded, "Is that so?" My apparent indifference infuriated her. "How can you remain so composed when your husband is in such a grave state? Don't you care about him at all?" Her words struck a nerve, and I felt a wave of anger rise within me. This confrontation was the final straw in what had been a deteriorating relationship, and I was ready to walk away. Earlier that day, there had been another emergency. Ruby was rushed to the hospital after a severe allergic reaction that threatened her life. I had warned everyone about her allergies repeatedly, yet here we were again. I pulled out evidence from my bag, presenting it to Hudson's parents, who were visibly caught off guard. Their shared nervous tic, a quick scratch of the head, betrayed their guilt. I confronted them about their unexpected visit earlier. They had just returned from a trip to a coastal town they often visited. Supposed to stay overnight, they forgot to book their usual hotel and found all other lodgings full, so they came back early. They brought souvenirs, rice crackers, which they gave to Mason to show to Ruby. Mason saw nothing amiss since Ruby often enjoyed these crackers, and he left. Shortly after, Ruby started reacting in the living room. At the hospital, I discovered the package contained 3 types of crackers, the usual kind and a new shrimp-flavored variant, which was not indicated on the box. I confronted Hudson's parents. Did you intentionally give Ruby the shrimp crackers and then hide the packaging? They dismissed the severity, claiming it was all in her head. I was livid. Knowingly giving someone an allergen could be considered assault. This is ridiculous, they retorted, believing they had done us a favor. I couldn't forgive them for endangering Ruby's life. In the heat of the moment, they tried to shift the focus back to Hudson's accident. Now's not the time for this. We came to tell you about Hudson's accident. Don't you even care, they pleaded. But I was done caring. Hudson had used our daughter's illness as an excuse to take time off for a trip with his mistress. I showed them the evidence I had collected from a private investigator. They were stunned. I declared my intent to divorce Hudson and pursue legal action against him and his parents for their reckless endangerment. My patience had run out. It was time to put my foot down and protect Ruby from any more harm. As I wrapped up my statement, a police car screeched to a halt outside the office, its sirens piercing the air. Mason had alerted the authorities on our drive back. Moments later, officers were at Hudson's parents' doorstep, requesting their presence at the station for an inquiry into an alleged assault. The news startled them into resistance, but they were soon escorted away. 1 week on, a call from an unfamiliar number reached me. It was the hospital housing Hudson. Despite our estrangement, he had listed me as his emergency contact. Mrs. Brown, I apologize for the intrusion, but Mr. Brown is insistent we reach out to you, the voice explained. Reluctantly, to spare the hospital's staff further trouble, I visited Hudson. Upon seeing me, Hudson erupted. Finally, you show up, you neglectful wife. You've been dodging my calls. What gives? Since the accident, I had ignored Hudson's attempts to contact me. His stay in the hospital conveniently coincided with my final preparations to relocate and my consultations with a divorce attorney. Mason and Ruby had given their full support to my decision. I didn't respond because you requested privacy, Hudson. I assumed you were busy. I replied calmly, feigning ignorance to provoke him further. And you took my credit card. Today's my discharge day, and I can't settle my hospital bill without my insurance card. Go pay it at the front desk. I didn't bring your insurance card. Maybe ask your parents for help. Ridiculous. How can I? You're the reason they're incarcerated. These past weeks have been a nightmare, and I'm considering suing you for emotional distress, Hudson shouted, his voice filling even the secluded room. I'd reached my limit. Actually, Hudson, I'll be the one filing for alimony and child support. Don't act unaware. I know precisely what you've been up to, and I have the evidence to prove it, I declared, showing him the extensive dossier I'd compiled. As he absorbed the weight of the evidence, his composure crumbled. I've already spoken to a lawyer, and they'll be in touch soon. Mason and Ruby are aware of everything, and they back the divorce. I can't afford to pay what you're asking, Hudson stammered, his panic evident. You've hardly worked, using Ruby as an excuse. Just find the funds and settle it, I stated firmly, uninterested in his excuses. At that moment, a confident young woman with long black hair entered. Hudson and I were both taken aback. You must be Hudson's wife. Well, now that it's all out in the open, I might as well tell you. I was the one with Hudson on that trip, she declared boldly. At the time of the accident, I remained silent. The woman, whom Hudson referred to as Layla, looked at me with an intensity that mirrored the one in the photographs I had seen. Taking a deep breath, I responded to her introduction, acknowledging that she had been hurt in the accident. I mentioned that I was lucky to have been released from the hospital quickly due to minor injuries. During our conversation, it came to light that Layla was considering divorcing Hudson, a decision that aligned with her feelings, as she confessed her love for him and expressed her desire to be with him. Layla informed me that although Hudson had not yet agreed to the divorce and was concerned about the financial burden it would entail, she was prepared to handle all related expenses, including alimony, to facilitate their separation. She reassured Hudson that by choosing her, he would not only resolve his financial issues, but would also have a partner who was younger and perhaps more aligned with his aspirations. Hudson, initially overwhelmed, realized that Layla's proposal could indeed solve his monetary problems. The promise of a new, uncomplicated life with her seemed appealing. Moved by her offer, he declared her his true partner, and they agreed to marry. As they celebrated their decision, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation, knowing well the complications that awaited Hudson. A private investigator had previously revealed to me that Layla was not just any woman. She was the granddaughter of a notorious crime family's leader. During this pivotal moment, men in black suits entered, confirming her connections to the underworld. Hudson's face paled as he realized the extent of his new reality, that escaping now could endanger his life. I wished them luck and left, smiling subtly. Within a month, thanks to my attorney, my divorce was finalized. Despite the dramatic turn of events, Layla honored her commitments, covering all expenses she had promised to pay. Hudson, now entangled in a web of debts and familial obligations, had no choice but to integrate into the crime family. He was forced to abandon his job, and the repercussions of his choices extended to his family, who faced public disgrace and isolation. In contrast, my children and I embraced a fresh start. My small handmade business thrived, and my children, especially Ruby, who recovered from her health issues, brought immense joy to my life. As we looked forward to celebrating our new beginnings with a special vacation, I remained committed to creating happiness for others through my work, teaching my children the value of empathy and resilience.